Good afternoon. My name is Don Maxwell from Live IT Academy, and today we're going to be discussing using date and time function in Excel 2016. All right, so currently we have a report here, regional sales report, and the first quarter, January through March, and our sales rep and location where they're from, and the total amount and commission. Right? But today we're going to be looking at date functions. Today's date and time, and March closing date and commission date. So how do we go about inserting date and time in our Excel spreadsheet? Well, there are many different ways. We can insert as a formula. So for example, today's date and time in B3, we can go to the cell B3 next to our label, today's date and time, and we can press the equal, right? Remember the equal plus or the minus, but the equal sign is what I use most. And then we are going to invoke or start to type the function. Now, we're going to be using the now function, so as I type now, right? Notice the category now is at the bottom, now comes to the top as I type, and I can double click on that function, right? Notice that function does not need any argument. There's nothing in the parentheses, right? And you can see that in the screen tip. And if I press the enter button, that will show me the date and time, right? Remember in Excel, you can reformat. You can reformat a date, right? Because a date is nothing more than a series or serial numbers, right? So for example, Excel looks at dates from January 1st, 1900s and calculate today's date, right? So we can have an actual number. For example, if I look at this as a general number, let's reformat, first of all, the date. So let's go to Home, Numbers, and let's go into the format category, and let's look for a short date, right? Now, this is a short date, right? What if I want to look at it as a number, a specific number? Can I do that? Absolutely, right? Because remember, Excel looks at this as a serial number, right? And if I go back, format it as a long date, right? Again, a long date. So I can reformat in many different ways, right? The other way is to go to Home, Numbers, right? And note that I have a date category, right? And also I have several date formats that I could use for my date, right? Oh, by the way, if you were wondering why the asterisk in front of the dates, the explanation is right here at the bottom, right? The asterisk respond to changes in regional date and time settings that are specified for the operating system. Right? Formats without an asterisk are not affected by the operating system date. So what we're saying is the format with the asterisk is directly related to your system date, your computer's date, right? So we'll look at your computer's date. And remember what I said, Excel generally calculates date from January 1st, 1900s, right? All right, so let's go back and look at other ways that we can invoke our dates. All right, just reformat it. All right, so another way we can invoke the date is to go to the Formulas tab in the function library, and we can also click on the down arrow of the date and time. Right, and again, date and time, if we were to select the now function, you'll see that it returns the current date and time format as a date and time. So note that in the function library, you have categories of common functions, right? Recently used functions, financial, logical, text, date, lookup, math and trig, and so on, right? Another place that you can see that is if you go to the insert function, right? And you will note that on the insert function, it tells me the argument, right? Well, so let's clear this field, clear. And let's go to the insert function, and there you'll see, right, the date and time. And we're going to select the now function. So it's in alphabetical order. So we're going to click on the now function, right? And there again, it shows you that it returns the current date and time format. So I'm going to click OK. And there you have it, right? Date and time function. Now, if you would prefer your date to be in a different format, remember, you can simply go to Home, Numbers, right? And pick a format for your date as well, right? Or what else can we do? We can go to the dialog box. We can go to category date and pick a different function or a different format, sorry, for a date. Okay, next let's look at closing date. Let's say we want the closing date to be today's date. So there's another function that we can use called today's function, right? And again, you know several ways of invoking this. So let's go select the cell, the resultant cell, B17, next to the closing date. And we simply want to put today's date there, right? So let's go to the formulas, date, function library, date and time. And now we're looking for today. See today, right? And again, return the date format as a date. No arguments needed, right? So I'm going to double click on that date and whoops, made a little boo-boo there. So let's get rid of that extra cell. And you can see it returns the current date format, right? This function takes no arguments at all. And if we want to learn more or understand more of the syntax of the function, we can click on the help this function. That will take us online to give us a more description of the syntax of the function. Let's click OK here, right? And you'll see that the date, if you look in the formula bar, it says today's date, and the current date appears. All right. Now remember that this date is going to be able to be updated each time you come into your Excel spreadsheet because it will reflect today's date. Right. Now, in this project, we want to be able to determine what the commission date is. And let's say the commission date is 30 days from the closing date. What can we do? Well, let's go to the commission date field. And we're going to put a formula here. And let's say equal. Now, equals today's date. So we're going to click on B17. All right, today's date, and you can see the animation around today's date, B17. And we're going to press the plus sign because we're going to add 30 days. And remember, date is simply a number, so I'm going to add 30, and that represents 30 days. And press the enter button, and you'll see that that date is 30 days from the closing date. Simply adding. And let's go to the formula bar, equal B17 plus 30. Right? How simple is that? Okay, well, there are other things to note here. Right? As I said, today's function uses the computer's internal clock. Right? And again, the internal clock returns the current date information and it gets recalculated as needed. Right? We also learned that we have many different categories of functions, right? And we saw either in the function library where they're pretty clear, or you can go into the insert function, and you can pick the category function. In our case, we want the date function category, and we can see a list of all the functions and how to use them, including what arguments are needed. Like, for example, date function could use year, month, and day, and it tells you what's returned for that function. What's the result? What the result should be. Return the number that represent the date in the Microsoft Excel date and time code, right? So if you go to year, for example, it'll tell you that. Same if we go to now function, you'll see it returns the current date and time format, right? Notice that there is no arguments for this, right? While there are arguments for other functions like time text and let's say days 360 would require a start date and an end date and some method, right? So there are different arguments for some of these functions, but the ones we're using today, the now and the today, has no arguments. All right, so let's click OK here. All right, cancel out of that, and you'll see that we have entered the now function, and we also entered the today's function, and we have added 30 days to the today's function to get the commission date, right? And we also learned that we can invoke that through the insert function, or we can go to formulas, function library, and we can pick from that category, date and time, right? As well as we see that we can manually enter the date and time equal now, right? Double click on now and press the enter button, and there you go. All right, so let's iterate what or more understanding of how dates are calculated using serial values, serial number. We know that when you enter a date in a cell, it appears in a familiar format, right? Different formats. We know that also it appears as a serial value, which is a number in a sequential series of numbers. We said that the date serial value represents the number of days since January 1st, 1900s. We say dates are serial values that are can be stored in calculations, right? They can be used in calculations, right? For example, you saw where we added the 30 days, right? And let's see what that looks like if we were to look at it, the 30 days in general number, home, go to general, and you can see it. Look at the number, 43,096, right? So that is a serial value, right? And of course, we know that should be represented as a date. All right, so this is useful to know that if you remove the format from the cell, it'll be formatted as a date, and if you apply a general format as a date, it will be formatted as a date. So sometimes in your spreadsheet, when you have dates and they look like numbers, all you have to do is reformat the numbers if they do represent dates. So instead of displaying the date, Excel displays serial values that represent that date. And in order to make the cell content recognized again as dates, we have to reformat that, right? We choose date format, and in the type list we click OK. So we can do it either from the dialog box under date, picking the type and selecting the format, right? Or we can go to the numbers category, home numbers, down arrow, and pick the date type that we want, right? Short date, long date. Okay. All right. So in a more advanced class, we go into more details about date, time, and function, but for today, understand both the now and the today's function using Excel 2016. Okay, see you in a more advanced module.